Big Ten football media days are here, and last time, Curt Cignetti made a couple bold predictions that have people turning their heads. What's it going to do this year?
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, and it is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Well, a jam-packed show for you on this Tuesday as we continue to work our way through the month of July, as we'll talk a little bit of Indiana basketball at the end of the show, a final roster update as both Leal and Luke Goode both had their waivers denied by the NCAA. We'll talk about what the roster looks like now, why that may not be such a horrible thing to have nobody returning from last year's team. But Big Ten Media Days is here. It begins today on Tuesday out in Las Vegas. It's a 3-day event, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, because that's kind of how long it takes when you have 18 head coaches and 3 athletes from every team that have to get up there and speak in multiple areas out in Las Vegas. And so it begins today. And there's always the narrative, right, about, well, what coach is going to say something, who's going to make a fool of themselves, and who's going to make people mad, who's going to get the fans fired up, who's going to have a funny joke, who's going to talk smack about somebody else. I mean, that's what media days is about to an extent. That's what a lot of the fans look for. That's what we want to see, is like, all right, who's going to put their foot in their mouth, who's going to say something they shouldn't. But in regard to what Indiana is going to do, and Indiana goes today, on Tuesday, we'll be joined by Illinois, Maryland, Nebraska, Ohio State, and Rutgers. And so, of course, Ohio State going to be a main focus this year, given what they did a year ago. But I believe that Indiana will get some serious coverage because of what we did a year ago. Of all those teams on there, there's only 2 that made it to the college football playoff, and one of them is the Indiana Hoosiers. And so I've been on record saying this several times leading into this event, but Indiana deserves a ton of media coverage from this today. And we'll talk about everything that Cignetti says and cover it all on tomorrow's show. But man, why would you not want to cover a team that just made it to the college football playoff? Why would you not want to go and say, hey, what's your roster look like now? Because most of these people haven't looked at it, let's be real, because they're picking Indiana to finish middle of the pack in the Big Ten. They don't look, they don't care. And so this is a perfect opportunity for them to actually sit down and look at Indiana's roster for the first time. But you at least get to ask Curt Cignetti, hey man, you made the playoff, what are you going to do this year, right? And we know that those questions are coming his way, and he better know that those questions are coming his way. It's inevitable, right? Well, how do you avoid the step back, coach? How do you get back to the playoff? Can you do it again? That's the main question he's going to have. That's the one he has to answer time and time again when he takes the main podium today and then in the breakout room. I believe the main podium is like 15 to 20 minutes, and then that breakout room is like 30 to 45, somewhere in there. And so he better be ready to answer that question. How do you do it again? What is going to help you get back to the college football playoff? And to be honest, I'm fascinated to hear what he has to say, because I've told you and everybody that'll listen, I think the roster is just as good, if not better, this year than it was last year. Your offensive line is improved. I think your ceiling of your quarterback is higher. Your receivers are back. Your running back room could be better by the end of the year. And your defense is just as good, maybe just a hair backwards, but not by much at all. And so I'm curious to hear what Curt Cignetti says about how they're going to get back. Because if you remember last year, right, he made his Big Ten Media Days debut and he turned some heads and he made some bold statements. I expect him to do that again this year. He talked about how he was absolutely confident that the Hoosiers would be better than 17th in the conference when it was all said and done. think that was a pretty fair assessment and a pretty good guess by the head ball coach. I think he also had something to say. In fact, I know he had something to say about that road trip out to UCLA because everybody was giving him crap about it and saying, "Oh, are you going to be ready to play on the road against UCLA at the Rose Bowl?" And he was like, "Yeah, the place is old and we're going to go kick somebody's you know what." Like, that's what Curt Cignetti said last year at Big Ten Media Days, and basically just shrugged off all the negative comments and all of the derogatory things that people in the media were saying because it was Indiana. He believed. He knew what he had, and he knew how good he was. He knew how good his coaching staff was, and he knew how good his roster was. And so I fully expect him to have that same amount of confidence when he takes the podium this year at Big Ten Media Days. And look, I don't expect him to get up there and say, "Yeah, we're absolutely 100%, no doubt about it, making the college football playoff once again this year." Nobody can say that accurately. But I guarantee you he will portray the idea that the message inside the building is that the standard is to do it again. I guarantee he says something like that today because that's what Curt Cignetti does. He's going to talk about the work that they're putting in. He's going to talk about the effort that they're putting in, the attention to detail that they demand at IU. I hope people ask him about his recruiting efforts because that continues to surge, right? Still in the top 30, flirting with a top 25 class, depending on where you look. And I expect him to make some sort of a bold statement about, hey, maybe we go on the road and beat Oregon this year. Maybe we go on the road and beat Penn State this year. Maybe we're another 10-win football team this year. I expect him to have that sort of confidence because that's who he is. And that's the swagger that he has brought with Indiana football. And I expect that to carry into the three players that he's bringing with him: Elijah Surratt, Michael Kamara, and Aiden Fisher. Three guys that represent this team extremely well. And I love the idea that those three guys are coming with him. Guys that have been with him since James Madison and are now two All-Americans and another one that's flirting with it in Elijah Surratt on that football team. What more could you ask for in terms of superstars, firepower that you're bringing to Big Ten Media Days? So what kind of a bold statement, a bold take, a hot prediction will Curt Cignetti get us? I don't know. He'll call out one of Oregon or Penn State. That's my prediction, is that he'll predict us to go on the road and win one or both of those games. That's just who he is. Whether it happens or not, we don't know yet, but that's where I'm going. I think he'll have something to say about those tough road trips and having to get over the hump of beating those good teams, but at least believing that this team has the talent to do so. So that's where I'm going. That's my prediction on the hot take that Curt Cignetti has, is that he's going to call Indiana winning on the road in either Eugene or Happy Valley. But he will take the podium today, again, alongside Illinois, Maryland, Nebraska, Ohio State, and Rutgers. It's going to be all over the Big Ten Network. It'll be all over the internet as well. We'll talk about that tomorrow on what Cignetti and the IU players have to say. But what will the other coaches say around the Big Ten? Will it be similar to the Big 12 and the SEC, or will the Big Ten be in a league of its own? We'll talk about that coming up next right here on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Game Time. All right, it's that time of year, and if you've decided last minute that you need to head to a ball game with your friends or your family, well, maybe it's game day, and you suddenly realize that you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without all the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes all of that possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. It's the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB and all of our shows that we have on our baseball channel. And that's why you need to be using the Game Time app. If you're going to a baseball game, use the Game Time app. It really is that simple, okay? Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here, making this your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. And as we continue on, talking Big Ten Media Days. And Big Ten Media Days this year, a little unique, right? First time out of Las Vegas, which is very cool. I unfortunately was not able to make the trip. I'm hoping to be able to be there next year if that's where it's at. I don't think they've announced where it's at just yet, but hoping to be there next year. Of course, we've seen it in Indianapolis several times and things. And so a couple of my Locked On counterparts are going to be out there. Believe Spencer McLaughlin's going to be out there for Ducks. Believe Sonny's out there for Locked On Illini. Trent Condon for Locked On Hawkeyes. And so be sure to go and check them out. They'll have full coverage for you this week as well. But it's unique because we've already had the chance to see two major conferences have their media days. Big 12 got it started a couple of weeks ago. The SEC's media days was last week in Atlanta. And now you have Big 10 football media days in Las Vegas, which I understand doesn't make a ton of sense for the Big 10 to be having it in Vegas. But hey, I don't hear anybody complaining about having to go work in Las Vegas, right? And so it's unique because we've already had a chance to listen to the Big 12 coaches complain that they don't know what's going on. And then the SEC just kind of like, we're here, whatever. Now you've got the Big 10. Of course, Big 10 commissioner will open things up, and then you'll have everybody speak over the next 3 days. And so I'm curious, before we get into individual coaches and players and teams here, I'm really curious on what the tone is this week at Big Ten Media Days, because as I mentioned, the Big 12 sat and cried the whole time. They said that they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know what the rules were. They just felt they were chained up. They had no idea, and they were just kind of wah. All they did was cry and say that they didn't know what the rules were, which is fair. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying that's what they did. Then the idea the following week going into SEC media days was, ain't no way those coaches start talking about how they don't know what the rules are and they're scared for the future and they're concerned with how it's going to go down, right? There's no way that the Georgias and the Alabamas and the Texases of the world were going to have anything to say about that sort of stuff. And as far as I saw, I don't think they had much to say. Those teams in particular probably deflected a little bit. Sure, the smaller teams in that conference may have had something to say, but overall, they just talked more. And Greg Sankey in particular, the SEC commissioner, had a lot more to say about the idea of expanding the SEC conference, expanding the college football playoff, and going back and looking at everything and seeing at the end of the day what benefits the SEC the most. Well, what I would say from the Big Ten perspective is make up your mind. Big Ten's good. We've made up our mind. We're here. We're ready. We're just waiting on you. But the SEC won't make up their mind. They keep changing. They keep backing out. And good for the Big Ten. And I hope that that is reiterated here today when that gets started at Big Ten Media Days. I hope it's reiterated that the Big Ten is willing to work with the SEC on things, but they're not going to give in to the SEC on things, because that's what Sankey wants us to do as the Big Ten. That's what the SEC wants. They want full control. They believe that they deserve all the control, all the say, and can decide the entire future of college athletics with one man's hands, Greg Sankey. No, that is not how it's going to work. And I respect the Big Ten and Tony Petito for keeping their ground, holding their ground, and saying, no, we're not going to play that way. We'll play nice, but you have to play nice too. And so I fully expect that to be the message this week at Big Ten Media Days, rather. And I'm curious if the coaches will all have kind of that same uniformity, right? Will they all kind of be on the same page? Will Ohio State deflect questions about the future of college football with revenue sharing? Will Michigan deflect questions about the future of college football and revenue sharing? Or will some of the teams like a Washington, for example, or heck, in Indiana may have something to say. Be like, Curt Cignetti may get up there and say, well, here's what we're doing. here's what everybody else is doing, and this is why it's wrong. This is why it's not going to work, and we hope that there are punishments. Let's be real. Indiana can't keep up with whatever money's being thrown around, or this fake money, right, that Pete Nakos is talking about, that Ohio State throws around, or Michigan throws around, or USC's throwing around. We can't keep up with that. And there's a lot of teams in the Big Ten that can't. And so which coaches are going to come out and say something? Does Iowa have something to say? Does, I don't know, does, heck, Purdue or UCLA have something to say about what's going on in college football? I'm really, really curious to hear if the coaches are united in certain things and split on other things. And so that is a big talking point going into it this week. But then each team, of course, will have their own concerns. They'll have their own questions. They'll have their own topics and kind of their focus that people will hit them on, right? You start looking, heck, just looking at today, Illinois. Can they handle the hype? Are they going to meet the expectations? Can they avoid the step back from a year ago? Maryland, are they actually going to be good? Can they finally figure it out? What about Nebraska? Can this be the team that actually gets over the hump? They beat a couple of teams and have a say to make it to the college football playoff. I'm literally just looking at the list here as we go. Ohio State, can you do it again, right? Rutgers, are you going to compete? Pretty much where it's going to be. Same thing with so many of these squads. I mean, heck, Minnesota, somebody better hammer PJ Fleck and be like, hey, man, question. What did you do to deserve your extension that you just got? Were you expecting that, or do you just plan on being in Minnesota forever? Like, any words there, right? That's what I would ask. Northwestern, not wasting my time. Oregon and Dan Lanning, can they get over that quote-unquote hump, right? Can they make a push and win the college football playoff? Penn State, clearly, is this it? Penn State and James Franklin has to be done this year. That'll be all the things that are hammered to James Franklin this week. He speaks on Wednesday. Washington is interesting because Washington, to me, is the dark horse in the Big Ten. I think the Huskies are a really, really good football team. And I'm curious, I'm curious on if people will pick up on that, pick up on the idea of Damon Williams being actually a pretty good player, and whether also curious on where people pick Washington as well. I think that will be fascinating. Wisconsin, does Luke Fickell feel the pressure? That would be my question. Does he feel that this year has to be the year that they at least compete in the Big Ten for him to keep his job? I look at Thursday, Iowa, kind of the same. I mean, can they just get some big games? Can they have a say in the Big Ten? Can Michigan get back to the college football playoff? Michigan State, can they turn it around and get over that? What is it? 5.5 win total, 6.5, 4.5. It's somewhere in there. I don't know. Can they make a bowl game? I guess is what Michigan State's questions will be. Purdue, how fast can it come together, right? New head coach, year one in the Big Ten. It's going to be tough. Can they get it to come together and get a couple of games on that team or on that schedule for the Purdue Boilermakers? UCLA, it's all going to be about Nico. Just go ahead and be ready for that. And then USC, if you can get it away from recruiting, it'll be about Lincoln Riley and his job security there. They'll ask him if he's feeling the pressure. They'll ask him if he feels that this is the year that he has to put it all together. But I have a feeling a lot of it's going to be focused on that recruiting and things. And so just a quick hitter right there, what I think will be asked of these coaches at Big Ten Media Days. But I'm pumped about it, man. Really excited for the next few days to hear what they have to say, see the way they carry themselves, but specifically for Curt Cignetti and the Indiana Hoosiers. All right, coming up in our final segment on Locked On Hoosiers, we will flip over to basketball because some news that has been finalized and the roster is official. We'll talk about Indiana basketball and Anthony Leal, Luke Goode coming up next right here on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and spending in one place. So, in addition to managing your money, you're also building a little bit of wealth. And for me, having everything in one app in one place rather than clicking here, looking at this account. Okay, cool. Then clicking over here, looking at this one. All right, well, it could be better. Then looking over here, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Rather than doing all of that, having to log in, no, don't mess with that. Monarch Money's in one place. You need one login. Everything's in one spot. You can check it all. You're in and out in less than 5 minutes. It really is the way to go. And it helps you just keep everything in line, keep it in control, and check it when you need to. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, final segment on Locked On Hoosiers. Again, thank you so much for being here and supporting the show any way that you do. But if you are looking for a way to easily support the show and one that is free as well, all of this is that way. If you're listening on audio, your Spotify's, your Amazon's, your Apple's, however you're listening to us, be sure that you're following us, having those notifications turned on so you never miss a new episode here in the off season, especially during the season as well, where we'll have a ton of stuff going out for you. Make sure you have that bell turned on, the notifications coming to your phone, your laptop, your computer, whatever the case may be, and send this to somebody that's not already listening to Locked On Hoosiers, okay? And then if you're on YouTube, on the video side, 3-step process helps me out, helps out everybody. Hit the thumbs up. Like the video. That's step 1. Leave your thoughts down in the YouTube comments. That's step 2. Your thoughts on Big Ten Media Days. Will Curt Cignetti have something to say? Will he be more reserved this year? Which head coach should be hammered at Media Days and hammered by questions, not the other way around, right? And then if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, okay? We are, just for a quick update as we're here recording, we are making a push to 6,000 subscribers. We are 60 away from 6K. I think we can get there before the month of July is over. It's a lot, but I think we can do it. So hit the subscribe button on YouTube, and I really appreciate however you support the show. All right, final segment, talking basketball here on Locked On Hoosiers. And one of these pieces of news happened weeks ago. The other one happened about 4 or 5 days ago, but I have not had a chance to sit down and actually talk to you about all of this. But now that it is finalized, Anthony Leal and Luke Goode, who of course were on the team a year ago for Indiana basketball, they applied through the NCAA for a waiver for an extra year of eligibility for their given reasons. And both of them were officially denied. Now, Anthony Leal, like I said, that one happened weeks ago. That one was more expected to happen. The Luke Goode one was a little disappointing. I will be honest with you. It was a little disappointing to me because all signs were pointing towards this having a good chance of happening. There was no guarantee, of course, and the worst part was there was really no timeline on this because, you know, the people in that department and in that area just get to do whatever they want to do and get to work at their own pace and just have no repercussions, which is great. But all signs were pointing towards this having a good chance of happening for Luke Goode. And I was hoping it would. I think Luke Goode's a really good player, and I think he had his spurts last year. He had his moments last year, good and bad. I'll admit, good and bad, but it wasn't going to hurt this team by adding Luke Goode, and that's how I looked at it, was an addition because you didn't know if you were going to get him back or not. And so, yeah, I mean, I think having Luke Goode a part of this roster would have been really nice. Somebody that, yeah, he could have picked it up a little bit in terms of the effort up and down the floor, I guess. But his 3-point shooting was really, really good. And when he's on, he's on. And his defense was solid, not great, but solid. And just another body, another piece for you to utilize and use if you're Darren DeVries. But both of them got denied. They will both of them will not be on the roster. And so now it is official. It is a complete roster reset for Indiana basketball in 2025 and 2026. You now have 0 players who are coming back from last year's team onto this year's team, which was the initial assumption anyways. But now that this is all official, that's where it stands. So Anthony Leal, Luke Goode get denied. And here's what the roster looks like and sounds like today. Okay, just quickly here. Josiah Miles, Reed Bailey, and this is just in numerical order, okay? Josiah Miles, Reed Bailey, Jason Drake, Lamar Wilkerson, Sam Alexis, Connor Enright, Tayton Connerway, Nick Dorn, Josh Harris, Trent Sisley, Tucker DeVries, Alexa Ristic, that is official, the Serbian shooter, Jordan Rayford, and Ian Stevens, all right? So you've got those guys who are all going to be on this year's roster, all transfers, couple or one freshman coming in, right? Okay. We say the one freshman, but Alexa Ristic is technically a freshman in terms of his college eligibility, but you have one high school freshman. How about that? And Trent Sisley coming in on this roster. And so, man, I just can't get over this roster and looking at it and thinking, man, there's some serious talent on this team. Will it all come together? No idea. Couldn't tell you. Is it all going to flow? No idea. Couldn't tell you. Can they score? Yeah, they're going to score a lot of points. Can they play defense? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. Good news is that's what Darren DeVries hangs his hat on. And so I look at this roster up and down. I mean, look at the sizes. Let me rank these by size really quick. 6'10, 6'9, 6'8, 6'7, 6'7, 6'6, 6'6, 6'5, 6'5, 6'4, 6'3, 6'1, 6'0. There is nobody under 6 foot on this team. And you've got, yes, your true center in Reed Bailey, several forwards and guards who are 6'8, 6'7, 6'6. Like, size and athleticism will not be an issue on this year's team. I can promise you that right now. And so, again, Anthony Leal, we didn't have a whole lot of hope that one was going to happen. And to be honest, it is what it is. I'm not upset with that one. Luke Goode was kind of a, if it happens, great. If it doesn't, oh well. And I think the perspective I'm going to take here as we wrap up is, as good as it could have been to have Luke Goode on this team, it may not be such a bad thing for there not to be any carryover from last year to this year. And that's in coaching, roster, personnel. Just, I think a full reset is the best way to go for IU. And this is not implying that Indiana said no to Luke Goode. I'm just saying, given the circumstances, I think it's okay that there's nothing lingering from last year. And this truly is a new team, new staff, new era at IU. So wish nothing but the best to Anthony Leal and Luke Goode. You have this new roster on the squad this year, and I'm excited for what this team is going to be able to do on the hardwood with all new players, all new staff, and a new head coach in Darren DeVries. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers, man. Thank you so much for being here again. Truly appreciate all your support of the show. Excited for what Big Ten Media Days has to hold. We'll talk about what Cignetti and the Big Ten had to say in day one, and a whole lot more coming up on tomorrow's show. All right, so we are back then tomorrow right here for Locked On Hoosiers. And until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.